The UN General Assembly will convene in New York on September 23, 2024, welcoming world leaders and diplomats from the 193 countries represented at the UN for a week filled with speeches and minimal world relevance, a common outcome of these meetings. Prior to the meeting, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres held his pet project, Summit of the Future, in overstated fanfare. The Secretary-General billed the summit as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change human history by restarting international cooperation and embracing multilateralism. The pact included 56 actions, including multilateralism, and also upholding the UN Charter, peacekeeping, climate change, disarmament, regulating artificial intelligence, and reforms to both financial institutions and the UN Security Council. At the end of the summit, the UN Assembly adopted the Pact of the Future as a non-binding measure, highlighting the UN's impotence and Secretary-General Guterres' failure to fulfill the basic role of his position, or the UN. The two world wars, which resulted in unparalleled casualties even among the winners, inspired the creation of the United Nations. The goal was to establish an organization that could avert wars, establish a framework for conflict resolution without violence, and if disagreements arise, employ global cooperation to halt aggression. Economic and social advancement is part of the Charter, but the main role of the UN is to promote world peace and prevent war. The Security Council, comprising 15 countries, wields significant power in the current UN organization. 10 non-permanent members hold 2-year terms, while 5 permanent members, comprised of China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom and the United States, represent the 5 victor countries. These 5 permanent members possess veto power, which allows them to halt any UN action regardless of the decisions made by the other 14 members. This power is a primary source of dysfunction in the United Nations, hindering its ability to uphold the fundamental Charter goal of maintaining global peace. The General Assembly, which comprises 193 nations around the world and is considered the main policy body of the United Nations, is the other part of the UN. The UN Secretary-General, not necessarily an executive like a president or prime minister, leads the United Nations as its chief administrator. According to the rules set forth in the UN Charter, the Secretary-General cannot be a citizen of any of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. The UN Charter also states that the Secretary-General may bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter which, in his opinion, may threaten the maintenance of international peace and security. Although the Secretary-General cannot set the agenda for the Security Council or override a veto, their primary role is to work closely with it to maintain global peace and security. The primary mission of the UN is to prevent war, promote peace, and intervene when necessary to end a conflict. There are 45 conflicts in the world today, with the 3 most significant being the Ukraine War, Sudan, and the Gaza War, which combined are creating about 2,000 casualties a day. Against this backdrop, UN Secretary-General Guterres is focusing his influence and efforts on the Pact for the Future, relegating global peace and security to a secondary concern, with climate change and structural reform at the core of Guterres' agenda. Even if climate change is considered a member nation's primary concern, the UN's purpose is peace and security, not climate change, AI regulation, or financial reform. It is peace and security again. While some of these issues may have a connection to long-term security concerns, they do not impact the current situation, where conflicts claim the lives of at least 2,000 people daily. The UN should focus on these issues. This is also their core mission. One could argue that the UN is capable of multitasking, provided it operates competently and prioritizes its primary mission. However, the UN lacks competent leadership and management, and it should avoid excessive focus on peripheral issues that may or may not affect future peace and security. All other endeavors, until the UN can competently address its core role, are a waste of resources and potentially belong to another international body. Alternatively, they could become national issues for negotiation among nations, who then formulate their own policies to address their respective national priorities. With adequate reason, supporters of the UN expansive mission will argue that the 5 permanent Security Council members' veto power, introduction of bipolar politics, and obstruction of any serious attempts to bring about peace have broken the UN organizational structure. Critics of the Security Council are right, but it is the UN structure of which the Secretary-General accepted by the very nature of accepting the position. Part of his Pact of the Future is Security Council reform, but is this really a serious focus for Secretary Guterres? The Security Council, with its 5 members empowered to veto any proposed reform, must approve it. Institutions rarely give up power. So it is doubtful that the Permanent Five would take on any serious reform. And even if they did, how does having a rotating group of veto-wielding countries on the Security Council improve the prospect of peace? Hint, it doesn't. This reform effort squanders focus by ignoring the UN's basic core functions. Another point to consider is that Secretary-General Guterres is not even committed to using his position to promote peace, as he rarely travels to Russia or Ukraine to use his position to elevate ending conflicts. He has not visited Ukraine since 2023, nor has he been to Russia since 2022. He has not visited Israel since the war started in Gaza, and has only been to Egypt to visit the Egyptian side of the Gaza Strip to view relief supplies destined for Gaza. Guterres has not visited Sudan since 2017. His primary role as chief administrator is to promote the UN's mission, and he has shown that he is not willing to jeopardize his personal reputation or safety in the pursuit of peace, unlike UN Secretary-General Dag Hammarskjöld, who lost his life in a plane crash during a personal peace mission in the Congo in 1961. Whether it was disregard for the UN mission that he accepted, or his fear for his personal reputation and safety to do the hard work for peace, Secretary-General Guterres is just another long list of UN Secretary-Generals who are little more than perfunctory bureaucrats who serve a bureaucracy for the needs of the bureaucracy and are not set about meeting the purpose of why the UN was created in the first place. The excuse that the organizational structure is ill-suited for the organizational purpose cannot be an excuse for why Secretary Guterres and other Secretary-Generals cannot radically pursue peace and security. If the structure of the Security Council presents a barrier, the Secretary-General should utilize their platform to relentlessly advocate for peace. They should also leverage their position to exert external pressure on the Security Council, compelling them to either adopt a stance against peace or devise a viable solution for the UN to resolve the conflict. Peace, whether through negotiating a settlement, peacekeeping intervention missions similar to Kosovo, or intervention to stop a hostile invasion like the Korean War, is hard and it takes work. But it is not an excuse not to try, or even more outrageously ignore the pursuit of peace to chase vanity projects that are not part of the UN's and its Secretary-General's core purpose.